that you see here or on any of these is just done either with a disc sander or a drum sander. I also use, when you're getting into the areas like this, you've got two separate pieces. So I found a little Dremel tool works nice just to rough that edge off. And the reason I take that edge off there is otherwise you can get little fuzzies along those edges. So if I just a quick little rounding with a Dremel, with a drum sander on it, that's what I use. The bigger shaping is all a disc sander or a drum sander. Yes?
Don't you, if you have all the pieces done and a finish on them and they're all dry, fit into the frame, you start gluing, don't you ever get to the point you go, damn, it doesn't fit anymore? Everything slides, you know?
Happens all the time.
Oh, okay, so it's not a big deal. You just sand off the excess?
Yep, because you start with a pattern that fits perfectly on a piece of paper, and each one of these will slide and move a little bit as you're going, or you have that saw cut that you have to make up. That's how I come up with patterns like this. How do you fill some of the gaps using these dowels? A lot of times you see me using the grasses, like on Twilight's Refuge. You see how the grasses are there? So if I have a gap that shows up there, in goes another piece of grass. So those are some of the techniques I use to address that. But yes, they do move. Yes?
You said you glue one piece at a time.
Yep.
Do you weight it or clamp it in any way?
No, I usually just push it into the glue and let it sit, and then I try to glue the whole piece up in one setting, or a predominantly good share of it in one setting. Now, like I'll start down here, and then I'll just start working up. I'll probably place the major piece and then just start filling it in, and then as I have a gap in here, I'll start putting the dowels in. The dowels make great fillers because you can have lots of different sizes, and so I'll start with these bigger pieces. And generally, I try to get all the pieces glued in one setting. Saturday afternoon, working most of the afternoon, when I'm gluing them down.
Is it glued just on the back side of the piece then, or do you glue the sides to each other?
I actually use a combination of that. Glue goes on the back of every piece, but as I'm gluing the pieces in, I'll have one piece there, and as I look at the next piece, I'll glue it on the back, but I'll put a small bead along the side that's going to go up against the addition to the next piece. So if I'm gluing this piece here in, I'll put it on the back, and then there'll be glue put along this edge here, so that as I put it together, you get some adhesion that way. So I do put it on kind of like two sides, if you would. Yes?
Could you be more specific as to the type of equipment you use?
Well, I have a shopsmith. That's the primary tool that I use. So I've got my disc sander, I've got a drill press, I've got the circle saw on there. I have a separate scroll saw. I've got planers, because you hear me talk about different thicknesses. You know, you don't see them like, there's lots of different thicknesses. In some cases, I'll sand a piece down thinner, or I'll plate it thinner, or I'll put backer boards to get that three-dimensional effect. I've got a pretty well stock shop. I've got a jet table saw, I've got miter saws, all kinds of sanders. Those are the things that I use. A lot of hand tools. The Dremel tool is an important one.
What kind of blades do you use in your bandsaw?
What's that?
Blades in your bandsaw?
In bandsaw, I generally go from 1/8 to 1/4 inch in size. There are times, for example, like on the Eagle though, most of the Eagle was done with a 1/2 inch blade because they're bigger, longer, so I can make those cuts a whole lot faster through that wind. But generally, I use the smaller blades. I would say the majority of my cuts on the bandsaw are used with a 1/4 inch blade. And that's for the outside of the perimeters. And when I get to the interior, that's the tight curves. That's where I'll go to the 1/8 inch blade sometimes, but not too often. If I can't do it with a 1/4 inch, I start leaning towards the scroll saw to do it. The other thing that you have to be aware of is when you have your pattern of this nature, you know, a lot of times my piece of plywood will start this large, and when I've glued it on, all of a sudden, okay, there it is, on this piece of plywood. You've actually got to come in and cut right along here and recut that pattern again if you're going to then take this whole thing and put it on a picture. So that's another step, a lot of times that you'll see that's there, is having to cut that. So you end up cutting a lot of different times along the edges, and resanding and retouching finishes. Yeah.
You said the scholarship fund sells these, right?
What's that?
You said the scholarship fund you work with sells the pieces that you donate to raise money?
It's a raffle.
Okay. Oh, I see.
I
Okay.
just give it to them for an annual raffle at a golf tournament, and they sell a bunch of tickets on it.
Who are the customers, I guess, who's buying the tickets? Just
Predominantly, most people in my family, they go to the golf. It's a memorial type thing, so, and it goes to a school in western Wisconsin where I grew up. And it's just one way of me making a contribution back to them. Yes.
When you're laying it out, you do like with stained glass where you sometimes have a left border and a bottom border, and you kind of work one way over and up?
Generally, that's what I do, yes. And usually it starts by the signature piece, like this piece down here. And I'll start, you'll see it's in different places in different woods, but I do exactly that. I don't necessarily always do the left and go, but I start in one corner, yes.
I was gonna say, when you make some of those fine cuts, like on the grasses and stuff, do you use a paper pattern on the top, or do you use your scroll saw, or do you do it just by hand or by eye?
My grass is usually picking up the scraps that I already just cut off. The pieces that are laying on the floor, I'm picking them up and then I'm freesawing them.
Freestyle, okay.
When it comes to these things like this, that's a filler. That's the different types of dowels. I'll just take a dowel this long and just cut random lengths. So you get a three-dimensional effect in there. The shadows really help the pictures a lot.
Do you transfer your pattern to every piece though?
Yes.
Do you use paper or graph paper?
What I use, and if you look at this one, you got time afterwards, you'll see this is a tracing paper. So I draw my pattern on a tracing paper, and I forgot to bring my other secret weapon. Borrowed it from my mom, who was a quilter. It's got a little handle about this long, and on top of it's a little pointed wheel. And so if you look at this pattern, you'll see right along the lines, there's all these little holes that go into the wood. And that's generally how I will take a square board, put this over it, figure out where I want the grain in that board to fit in the piece, and then I'll use, I forget what they call that thing, but it puts all these little
That
holes in it.
pointy wheel thing.
Pointy wheel thing, yes. And I just use that to trace the pattern. So that's how I do it. And then you can pencil it in with a lead pencil or a white pencil if you're on dark woods. I saw a question over here.
I think you answered it already, but do you finish your pieces first and then glue them in, or do you glue everything together and then finish it?
When I first started, I glued some whole ones together and then finished it, but I would get some fuzzies. So since then, I've graduated to trying to finish the pieces beforehand.
Do you spray over it then after?
Yes.
Okay.
There's probably as many, about a half a dozen coats that I put on them. I mean, I want them to last for a long, long time. And I suspect they'll get wet somewhere along the line for some reason or another.
So you finished your glue up, then do you do square cuts, square the edges and stuff like that?
I usually try to start with a frame now. I usually do something like that, but it was tough to handle this big thing as it got heavier and heavier. So what I do now is that's why I like this frame. I actually build this interior frame here first on a piece of plywood. And that way, there's my square references. And then I work inside to fill in what I want to fill inside that frame. And then I add this stuff outside of it. That's why I like this frame. So hopefully you learned a little bit something tonight. Hopefully it inspires you to do something. I always find inspiration, and yes, I did meet Charlie at 10 o'clock, 2014, November 22nd. So that's the legend of 10 o'clock Charlie. Thanks for having me, folks.